I thought the best way to do this is, since there are multiple views of the office, I'm going to do a brief introduction of the subject matter. So the first thing is, I think the CFO's role is sometimes helping people, not necessarily just investors, but helping people see the forest and the trees. You know, much of the discussions we've had, from the company that made its presentation immediately prior to break, to the regulatory consultants, to IP, to all of those types of things here, have been not financial in their origins, or not financial in the way that they've been presented, but one way or the other, they come down to financial choices. So all of those things complicate what it is. If we could all develop devices in a vacuum, put out good product, help save people's lives or enrich their lives, it would be easy, it would be totally fun, it wouldn't be complicated. So somewhere along the line you need that board of advisors that was presented in the last presentation, or a group of people that help you out. You may need it earlier, you may need it later, you may need it whenever. And it gets down to, why do you ever need a CFO? I think the CFO tends to be the most maligned. No, regulatory is probably the most, no, compliant, no. There's a whole bunch of us that are the most maligned in an office. But I think you need a CFO because sometimes we can help you differentiate the forest and the trees in certain situations. Now, when I've been recruited or I've looked for help in the area, I always want to find a really well-equipped person. So here's a picture of a well-equipped CFO, and I'd like you to start, as you're looking at it, on the upper left, and then we'll go around. But the first thing you have to have is someone that comes in with a briefcase. The job's evolved over many years. It first started with, you needed lots of beans, because after all, accountants are bean counters, right? So you need that, because if you don't have the beans, it probably means that CFO is not experienced enough and can go back in time enough to understand the debits and the credits and things like that. You also need a green eye shade, because when I came into accounting, we wore green eye shades. We had little garters on our sleeves because we had to roll up the sleeves a lot and do things like that. So that's part of my historic bag.
Did you really wear those?
No. When I play tennis, maybe, but thank you. I need him occasionally just to ask the question. You need slide rules, but no, you don't need that anymore. You need you need a calculator. You need a computer, maybe you just need a cell phone. And clearly you need a variety of maps. The reason why you need a variety of maps, not in the literal sense, but in the figurative sense, is I think we're all going to find out as you go through the various projects that you're working on, there probably is not just one way to go. There's probably multiple ways to go. There's multiple paths. You choose one direction, it may be a straight line, most likely it's not. You're going to get to another stop sign, you're going to have to figure out whether it's right or left, maybe start, maybe stop, maybe restart, but you're going to have a map or a group of people, not just a CFO, that will help lead you through the various paths that you have to choose to go through. Third thing you need is a protection for a rainy day. Some of you may think that that's an umbrella. It's really the extra cash that you're always going to need, because all projects that I've experienced generally need 2, 3, 4, 10x the amount of cash that you all thought that it would need in the beginning. Things take time. If you don't start off the regulatory pathway and do it exactly the way the FDA wants, you have to go back and start again. That takes extra cash. One of those patent trolls comes and picks on your little device and says, you know, there's an IP thing from a long time ago that you have to be concerned with. It takes extra cash. Whatever it is, you need the umbrella. You need it not so much for the protection, but the extra cash, the extra time that it takes you to do it in. And then, in the end, there is light at the end of the forest. It's as you begin to develop the team, the process, the device, et cetera, you will begin to be able to see that your device will be able to be as successful as you hope it is. So now that I've kind of given you the introduction, about a week ago I asked a bunch of colleagues, about 30 or 40 people who I've worked with over time, my family, everybody, what does a CFO really do? Because sometimes that's confused. And the first person that responded is my daughter, who lives up in Berkeley and is doing the things that one might think you want to do in Berkeley. She will save at least one person's life as she's doing social work and things like that. But this is her perspective of what her father, the CFO, did as she was growing up. We talk to lots of investors because I always seem to be on the road. We do lots of quarterlies, always sitting at my desk while I was doing all that extra work. Travel to lots of places and talk to people in suits, not as much in suits. My kids pointed out to me when I was reticent to give them how much I earned because I was with a public company that they already knew because they Googled me. So you might as well fess up if you're public and tell them. And in her way, the they in quotes means, excuse me women, but it's the man, you know? They're watching you, so be careful. But then I also got responses from various people. What I did was I picked out a group of things that people thought CFOs could do, would do, from the various perspectives. And I'm not using this to go through each of the items on the list, but at any point in time from this point forward, if you have questions about what it is, or as a consultant, how do you get to that CFO? As an owner of a company or the founder of a company, when do you want to hire that person, and what's the perspectives that are valuable? As an attorney, you know, the CFO calls you up and yells at you because you've just spent too much of their money, those types of things. Let's ask questions if you want to, or I can go through a couple of these and respond to the little stories. To go back to Joe's introduction of that wonderful little clip, unfortunately, as an owner, a CFO, and other people involved in companies, sometimes things like that are not that far from reality. Those of you who work with companies may have an aspiration to do the public thing. That does happen the minute your company doesn't do what everybody wants it to do. Which leads me to the item on the middle on the right-hand sign. Part of the CFO's role is to develop the story and be the under-promiser and the over-deliverer. That's hard, because the more you under-promise and the more you over-deliver, the more the investor begins to adjust what they think you can do. So you need to have the balance of a reasonable underestimation and then a reasonable over-delivery, because Joe's stock wouldn't have gone just to 9.5, it might have gone to 15 and then dropped to 2. And that kind of a conversation with an investor, I don't think Joe could have shown up on the slide. So it's the balance, and it's that way not only for a CFO, it's that way for the CEO. It's the tightrope that you all walk. Can I stop for any questions or any thoughts?
Hey, it's your show, man. Do you want to ask a question of Rick, or you just want more stories because they're great?
Oh, what's the psychologist side? Most of my career, I'm a little bit different, if you haven't already figured it out, than many other buttoned-up financial types. Most of my career I've spent with startups. What I've noticed in this group over the past 2 days or so is that I don't think anybody here from either the company side or the consulting side or the professional side is short on passion. You demonstrated it the other night. The speech you gave was inspiring. The person that gave the global discussion yesterday, I think everybody lined up just to get his card and said, how can I be involved? So everybody here had the passion. Now with passion and events that sometimes don't go in that straight line to the upper right-hand corner of the chart. Occasionally it takes a dip, and I think the opposite of passion in the way that we present and we motivate people could actually become depression. So what any good exec, and I think this is broader than just a CFO, but any good exec has to do is to be mature enough, sharp enough or whatever, to be the psychologist. You have to be the cheerleader. You have to be able to say, even if things aren't great, why things will get better or best at some point in time. So that's the amateur psychologist. I don't have my degree, but I've been told that occasionally I've helped the executive wing out, and I know for a fact, on probably more occasions, my colleagues have helped me out. So it's the psychology of what it is that you're trying to do and the challenge associated with it.
I'm thinking that the manner of your speech and your presence, and I've come to know you a bit, that your even temperament is very helpful.
Isn't that deceptive?
Isn't it?
Well, no, but it's, I'll go off on the deep end. Absolutely. I'm as human or more human than anybody else. At the end of the day, you love what you love to do. And that's the part that makes it fun. That's the easy part of the psychology.
So tell me about the under-promise and over-deliver. Is the formula, we're going to read the tea leaves, and we've come to know Rick and his various careers, and we've tracked him and the like. Should we just expect that you're going to guide me to a penny a share less than you're really going to deliver? And so if we hit a penny a share more than we thought, that's good old Rick, that's what he does. And if it's 2 or 3 or 4 pennies more, wow, we have a rally. And if it's just under, then, that kind of thing. It's a game, I get it.
So I probably should have put another word up, and this really will be an answer to your question. It's a little bit of a chameleon also on the C level. I believe from a good CFO level that I'm probably a step behind the CEO and the chairman.
I think most people in the room would agree with that.
So sometimes the things that I might want to do, and I don't know if this is advice or just, I'm going to pay you all the $150 for my hour of therapy, but I don't necessarily have a personal philosophy. Each of the companies I've been with is different. To be honest, I would rather give everybody an accurate read, a range, and say, I'll be happy if we come within this $10 million range of revenue. Many of you are saying, boy, I would love to be in the position where I can give a $10 million range and it doesn't mean 0 to 10. But or a $1 million range or something, I would rather do that and say I'm happy to come within the range. But I know that in many companies, they like to game it and put it under. And within 2 or 3 quarters, the analysts, I'm not sure I don't see them, but the analysts will pick you up and say, even though you hit what you said you would do, you underperformed, because they figure it out. Mm-hmm. People are smart. Yes? You had your hand up, I think?
I did. Thank you so much. Michael Barone, Amgen. My question more comes from, how do we balance innovation and financial success? So, Amgen, the stock price has doubled over the last 2 years, which is awesome, but they've done that through...
Nice jacket.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Through, kind of a reduction in workforce, closing locations, and really leaning out a lot of the existing processes. And we've seen things, as the leaner you get, great, you can still achieve your goals and develop repeatability, but your ability to innovate in kind of that a little bit of chaos in which the innovation comes from goes away because you're running such a lean workforce. And so from the CFO perspective, how do we keep a share available for the innovative processes we need, right, while maintaining the performance that Wall Street is looking for?
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm going to rephrase the question maybe by giving you the answer. I would rather innovate in the most effective way that will add to both top line and bottom line, and set the standard, ideally, that Wall Street is looking for. Now, I also believe in Tinkerbell and the Good Fairy and everything like that, because one of the hardest things to balance with any investor, let's take this out of the public realm, is setting realistic expectations at the same time that you're trying to find an investor to buy your stock and invest in your company. I think human nature says, you know, if I could just do a little bit more, the value of the stock would be just a little bit more. If the stock was a little bit more, then, you know, I get diluted a little less, and therefore I make more money. So it's the balance between all those things. I know that at times I've calculated or presented a model, and I don't think that I'm the all-knowing and all-being person, where the innovation suggested by someone just didn't fly. But it didn't fly not because innovation is bad and evil. It didn't fly because either the rationale for growth in sales, profitability, and those types of things just weren't there. So anybody that says, I'm doing this just to make a bottom line, I think you also have to look at the metric of, can I sell more? And you know, there's some other stories along, you know, like, don't worry, I'll make up in volume what I lose in profits. You know, that type of thing. So a good financial person will help balance that.
Cesar, I understand that in addition to being a cardiologist, you are also developing or have developed a medical device?
Okay. With all respect, this is a very naive question from somebody in the valley to somebody that has already climbed the mountain. And I'm sorry about that. But at what point in the evolution of a startup do you need a CFO?
Good question.
It depends. Next question. No. It goes to, I think, the executive suite. I think it goes to the full executive suite too. And I don't want to lay everything out like my brain sits here and goes cost benefit, you know, all right, plus minus. But it goes to when I think the executive team needs that extra person. So I'll tell you that many startups in vogue today, and probably a healthy thing off of the 2008 crash, is that companies start virtually. It used to be in 2007 and before that you raised an obscene amount of money, built out manufacturing, built prototypes and had offices with, excuse me, my friend from Silicon Valley, I don't know where he is, but we don't have gyms anymore in many of the companies that we start up. It's like you find a place near a gym. It's those things. So you don't spend the money in the way that you used to. Well, you used to also hire a CFO as one of the first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people that you hired. Now, they're really good accountants that can help you do your books. You have really good people that can help you raise money and do those types of things. But when the cost of that or the convenience of that is such that you need someone full-time, go full-time. The other thing you can do is, how many people here that have started companies have a really well-rounded board? Okay? How many are now thinking about having a well-rounded board? And you don't have to raise your hand. But what that does is you can find the expertise with one of your advisors who can help that accountant do the things you want to do. So that's one thing. Angel rounds, maybe not. By the time you start going institutionally to raise money, you probably need a more sophisticated group of people, as a rule of thumb.
Would you tell us the story of bringing Globus Medical to IPO in 2012, a very difficult year for medical device players?
So I'm actually going to tell 3 stories.
Have at it.
If
I will
that's
go
okay.
away. Absolutely.
So I'm one of those crazy, perhaps, lucky guys who's done an IPO more than once. Each one of them have been different. The first one was with a pump company called Animas, insulin pump company. I was there as employee 23. Some called me Michael Jordan. Most didn't call me Michael Jordan, but I liked the number. It was a case where I was hired just as the device was approved. Salespeople were getting hired. Launch was 6 months out. And that was an experience where literally, as we were filing our IPO documents and just about ready to pull the string on the IPO, rules for revenue recognition and all sorts of rules changed. And I would say that that was perhaps the best IPO I had ever done, and I simply did it with, and give credit to the people that saved my life during that process. It was my CPA. It was an incredible advisor from an accounting firm that is no longer around, a lawyer who sat there and coached me through the process in a way that, I don't think I could have done it myself. But that was fascinating because in that one, we were the first device company to go out in about 1.5 to 2 years. And were oversold by 3, 4, 5 times. The next one was an IPO that didn't happen. It was with that other kind of a life science company called pharmaceuticals. It was something that the minute that we filed, we got put in play, which meant that not only did investors see what we were doing, it was in the Alzheimer's space, but so did a couple small pharmaceutical companies. Ultimately, the little guy that bought us was a company called Lilly. And we ended up with a competing round of financings and offers and such that one made too good, simply more than you could have raised in an IPO. And the investors kind of went home with I think it was a wheelbarrow full of money, and were very happy, and it was the IPO that never happened. And that was a good story and a good ending for that company. Globus was very different. Unlike the other two companies that needed money in order to continue in their ways, Globus, by the time I got there, which was 3.5, 4 years ago at this point, was already a almost $400 million company. Its adjusted EBITDA was 35%, so it made a whole lot of money. It had $200 and some odd million in the bank and didn't need the money from an IPO. It needed it for liquidity of its investors that had been around for 10 years. So that IPO was simply a way to get investors liquidity. And we had a funny thing happen after the IPO. For a company that really went for liquidity, we found that the public markets in the orthopedic space actually helped a company like Globus become more legitimate. It helped in recruiting, it helped in the payer mix, it helped in a whole lot of ways that people had lots of questions about. So in that case, for a company that went for liquidity, I think it did more for the company than just liquidity. The IPO had a whole bunch of banks on the cover. You select banks because you find who you think can do best, who can market the stock more, and who and which of those analysts that maybe will cover your stock after the fact, but in this day and age, you don't know for certain. So we had a great group. It was post-Facebook. If you remember the Facebook IPO, it was as good as the stock is now. That was how bad the IPO was. We went into a very, very challenging market. We thought we were worth a lot more than the markets thought we were. So we went out higher than we ultimately sold. We got out, we were public, and we succeeded. And I think we went out with $1.2 billion in market cap, and I suspect today it's about $2.4, $2.5 billion in market cap. So it's something that the market's determined, both for orthopedics and the general market. I can talk more about it. I don't know how much and how detailed, but that was the Globus IPO.
I'd be interested to know, with you being at the helm at a pharmaceutical company now, how different, if at all, is it to be chief financial officer in different parts of the life science industry?
I've been really lucky. I've gone kind of back and forth on both sides of the life science area. One thing I love is startup, which is what I'm doing. Globus was a more mature company, and my charge going into that was to help go public, stabilize the position, and do all those things, and hopefully that happened. Pharmaceutical side, your horizons are much longer, so you deal with a little bit different animal. Many of the devices that you're talking about here are 510Ks. So the horizon and the need to raise money is different, and the expectation of commercialization is significantly sharper. Your definition of the market, the economics of what you do, the reimbursement, the coding that you heard briefly before is extremely important for anybody with a short horizon. Pharmaceutical company I'm with now is involved in pain management and anti-inflammatory. It happens to have 2 compounds synthetically made that are derivatives of a certain cannabinoid that we all know and perhaps at some point in your life you loved. But we're going to deliver it transdermally. We're going to deliver it in a different way. It will not be medicinal marijuana. It will not be those types of things. But our horizon is about 2.5 years out to get through phase 2 and then another couple years for phase 3, which means we need a long-term, very patient investor who will deal with market trends differently than those of us in the room that also deal in devices. I'm fortunate to be as a director for a device company also, which is going through its acceptance and that type of process. It's in the bariatric space. And I'm living in 2 investing worlds at the same time. It's actually very fascinating.
Can we give you our money and invest in all your things?
Pardon?
We here in the room, can we give you our money and invest in your things? You have a very winning track record, and I'm sure that is part of why you are recruited into these companies. We have Rick Barron type of thing, yes? This isn't false humility time. Tell us.
No, actually, I think it's that Rick's the beneficiary of dealing with a couple really good entrepreneurs. And I hope I'm not being immodest or being false here. The thing that I've learned, which is the hardest thing to do, is the people that I work for surrounded themselves, except in the CFO position, with really smart and good people. And I think that's the key variable that we all should look for, either in choosing who you sit next to in the C office or any office, and who you hire as professionals. Find good, deep knowledge, find someone that has been there and done it before. I love the fact that you're working with the 20-year-olds and giving them a chance, because when they're old and crotchety like me, they will remember you. So find people along the way who are really smart and do those things, and that's an incredible thing to do. So it's a combination of people. If any one of the companies that I get credit for being the CFO of didn't have good products with good innovation, with good regulatory components and things like that, you wouldn't even know who I am. So it's the company and the team more than it's any one individual.
Fair enough. Good. Spontaneous applause from the crowd.
And I paid her. I'm a CFO.